From a church shaped like a chicken to the world's creepiest lighthouse, and some other strange places you've likely never seen before, here are 10 of the strangest abandoned places ever. Number 10. Pernambuco. What's stranger than an old and abandoned church? How about an old and abandoned church completely submerged in a drowned Brazilian city? The ruined Church of Petrolândia in Pernambuco, Brazil, tops off our list as one of the weirdest forgotten places ever. The only thing that remains from this once prosperous city is the top of the old church, jutting strangely out from the water reservoir for the state's largest hydroelectric dam. At first glance, you might think that the fading brick facade of the church actually belongs to a ruined factory or something. However, a closer look will reveal the archways standing clear of the water, telling the weird and unfortunate story of this last remaining relic of the town. While still inhabited, the church was the centerpiece of the town of Petrolândia. But once the government decided to build a hydroelectric plant, the town quickly came to an end. The entire city was flooded and the residents were moved to a new city, which somewhat ironically was powered by the new dam. And while everything else has been destroyed, the abandoned church still remains as a last vengeful memory that not even the mega powers of the dam can wash away. Number 9. The Chicken Church. The story of the Chicken Church is so interesting and so complex, it could take up this entire video. Bear with me while I try to sum up the incredible journey of one man and his strange chicken church in just a few minutes. First of all, the Chicken Church was born of a dream. Daniel Alamja dreamt one night of a snow-white dove sitting at the top of a hill, and a voice whispered to him to build a house of worship for all the people of the world. Shortly after the dream, Daniel was in the countryside when he came upon the exact same hill he had seen in the vision. It was a small hill nestled between many small Indonesian villages. The dreamer of the church left his contact information, and a few weeks later he paid around $2,000 for the acre of land that included the hill. Even though Daniel had no architectural experience, he designed the place completely by himself, and he actually didn't want it to be called the Chicken Church. Construction began in 1992, but after significant backlash from the local Muslims about a church being built in their neighborhood, and after a loss of funds in 2000, the church was abandoned. The place had no caretaker and it fell into disrepair very quickly. While the place might look silly to us from afar, it was actually meant to be a place of worship for people of all religions as a place of peace. But then in 2015, the Daily Mail and the Huffington Post released feature stories on the church which sparked a renewed interest. Just weeks after the articles, thousands of tourists began flocking to the site to see this unique place. They paid a nominal entrance fee and soon work began. After 15 years of abandonment, the Chicken Church once again held life. And now, over 30 years later, thousands of visitors go to the site to pray or to reflect on their lives. And those local people who were initially angry about the church being constructed are now making a small fortune off all the tourists pouring through the small Indonesian region. Number 8. Georgia's Forgotten Cable Cars. Chiatura is a small town in Georgia, the country, not the state. It was once a bustling town full of prosperity, as a large manganese reserve was located near the town in the mountains. However, when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the manganese industry was devastated, and most of the people in the town packed up and left. However, the town was not completely abandoned. Even though it's now referred to as a ghost town by many, and largely forgotten by the government, there are still a handful of people living in the badly decaying apartments in the mountains. In fact, the residents are still taking the same cable car up to their mountain town that has been functioning since the 1950s. According to the BBC, it's locally known as the Iron Coffin, because it has not had repairs or updates in around 70 years. Everything in this forgotten village is from the Soviet era, and it's still all being used by the handful of stubborn locals who refuse to leave the abandoned mining town. Number 7. Centralia. Perhaps the best-known ghost town in the United States of America is Centralia, located in Pennsylvania. The town originally boomed in the 1800s as a coal mining town. The very first tavern was opened in 1841, and Centralia was incorporated as a borough in 1866. However, most of the coal industry companies went out of business in the 1960s, prompting a mass exodus. Then in 1962, an exposed vein of coal ignited and is still burning to this very day. The town began to crumble because of issues with the fire raging beneath the streets, and carbon monoxide was reported to be sifting through the cracks. In 1992, Pennsylvania condemned every house in Centralia, forcing anyone who hadn't already absconded to pack up and leave. Out of the 1,000 residents who had lived there in 1992, only a small handful remain today, and they're mainly priests taking care of the local church. For all intents and purposes, Centralia is abandoned. According to professionals, the fire raging underneath the city of Centralia will continue to burn for another 250 years. Have you ever been here? Or would you go visit? Let me know in the comments below. Number 6. The Superman Building. The Industrial National Bank Building, also known as the Superman Building, is the tallest structure in the city of Providence, Rhode Island. It's also the tallest in the entire state of Rhode Island. It stands 428 feet tall, has 26 floors, and is completely abandoned. The building was originally commissioned in 1925 by the Industrial Trust Company, but then it changed names many times over the years as different banks were acquired by different banks. In 1998, the name was changed to the Bank of America Building. Then in 2008, right before the Great Recession, the building was purchased for $33 million, with the Bank of America being the only tenant. They spent about $7 million on a new sprinkler system and fire safety system, and just 5 years later, decided not to renew their lease. Since 2012, the building has sat completely abandoned. It's the largest building in Rhode Island and doesn't have a single occupant. In 2016, it was estimated that it would cost at least $115 million to get the building up to standard code. If you're wondering why it's called the Superman Building, that's because it looks exactly like the Daily Planet building from the Superman comic books. However, Superman co-creator Joe Shuster actually got his inspiration from the Fairmont Royal York building in Toronto. Score 1 for Canada. Number 5. Abandoned Santa Park. We've already seen one strange abandoned place in Brazil, and it's time to look at another. The abandoned Santa Park is by far one of the creepiest and strangest places on the planet. The park is known as Cidade Alba Noel, and it was intended to be a massive theme attraction in Brazil. However, when the creator of the park died, it became the largest abandoned park in all of Brazil. The place covers about 460 football fields and would have had more than just a creepy Santa Claus attraction. There would have been a concert hall, water slides, a Wild West-themed corner, and a 10-story tower of Jesus Christ, as is standard of any place in South America. Work began on this strange attraction in 2000, but the creator was killed tragically in a car accident just a few feet from the entrance of the park. A great deal of work had already been started on many attractions, but construction halted pretty much immediately. Since then, the park has decayed and turned into a disturbing museum of lost relics. It hasn't been demolished, and the attractions that were completed at the time are now overtaken by undergrowth and rust. Now it's more of a horror site for urban explorers than a fun place to take your kids. Number 4. Hotel in Iraq. Here's a place almost nobody has heard of. It's also one of the coolest and strangest abandoned places ever, surpassing pretty much any place you find on any list online. First, let's start with the guy who built this place. His name was Takashi Menakichi, and he was a rural strawberry farmer in Japan who for 21 years carved out a grand hotel from the solid rock of a cliff face on his farmland. He did this completely alone with nothing but a chisel, every single day until he died in 1925. The hotel was never completed, and as you can imagine, after 21 years of digging by hand, he still didn't get quite as far as if it had been done by a team with real tools. The only rooms that were successfully dug out were the lobby and the kitchen. No one has ever stayed in this hotel, and to this day it's fenced off and illegal to enter. And yes, it's quite obviously abandoned. The cave is now home to crickets and other horrifying insects. What may have looked impressive once has since been eroded by time. It's an absolutely surreal experience to creep down the cave tunnel into one man's psychotic dream of building a hotel. It's dark, it's cold, and it's a little clammy. The kitchen has a dirt floor, the lobby doesn't much look like a lobby, and at the very end of the excavation is a dead end at the bottom of an extremely creepy cave tunnel. Hopefully in the future, somebody will come and continue building the cave into a hotel simply because it's so cool. Or perhaps in 1,000 years, archaeologists will discover it and assume it had been built by a failed ancient civilization. Number 3. Soviet Sanatoriums. We're traveling back to Georgia for the next one. Again, Georgia the country and not the state. We're taking a look at some abandoned Soviet sanatoriums, which from between the 1920s and the 1980s had been extremely popular with Soviet soldiers and Russian civilians. This particular place is known as Skaltubo, and it was once a famous spa resort with therapeutic mineral springs and radon water therapy. The complex consisted of 19 sanatoriums and 9 bathhouses inside of one enormous park. In its heyday, at least 4 trains from Moscow arrived daily, carrying some of the richest passengers in the country. The resort was even frequented by Joseph Stalin. But like everything in the Soviet Union, 1990 spelled disaster. The Union collapsed, the sanatorium town was abandoned, and the concrete structures were all left to decay and crumble. 2 years later in 1992, war broke out in a nearby region, and an estimated 200,000 ethnic Georgians fled the conflict and took shelter inside this abandoned complex. Some reports claim that 25 years later, there are still several families squatting in this amazing relic of the past. Number 2. Lincoln Way. We're used to checking out abandoned buildings, but let's check out an entire abandoned neighborhood. The rural community of Lincoln Way is located in Pennsylvania, roughly 30 minutes from Pittsburgh City. Lincoln Way once held 52 properties and about 40 houses, but in the 1970s, around 16 families were driven from their homes in such a blistering hurry that they left everything they owned behind. Since then, everyone has left the community to be reclaimed by nature. So far as the legend goes, the reason for the sudden exodus could have been because of a paranormal beast the size of a horse that was living in the woods surrounding the community of Lincoln Way. But of course, that's just speculation. It could have been any number of reasons that pushed the residents out. The truth is that we really don't know the answers. The houses of this once bustling neighborhood are now pretty much demolished. Most of them are riddled with graffiti. Many of them don't have ceilings anymore, and not a single soul is living there. A fire even broke out and destroyed many of the houses as recently as 2015. Number 1. The abandoned Michigan lighthouse. There's nothing quite as cool as an old abandoned lighthouse. In fact, there are plenty of people who would love to purchase a lighthouse and live in it as a hermit. At Carp Lake, Michigan, there's the Wugoshansk Light Station. But no, there are no hermits living in it. The lighthouse is located in the middle of the water, and you'd need a boat just to reach the shore and get your groceries. Imagine trying to get your Amazon delivery when you don't have any access to a road. The story of the lighthouse goes all the way back to 1851, when it was first built as a way to steer mariners away from the nearby dangerous reefs. You know, exactly what lighthouses were designed for. But then, during World War II, the lighthouse served a different kind of purpose. The tower was used as a beacon for experimental radio-controlled drones. It was an extremely secret program codenamed Stag-1, and it was apparently used as a response against Japanese kamikaze attacks. The program involved using very basic drones to drop bombs on enemy vessels in a similar way the kamikazes would crash into a boat or another plane. That's the basics of it. And unfortunately for this lighthouse, it was the target for the experimental drone bombings. In 1943, bombs rained down all around the poor and defenseless lighthouse. Most fell into the water, but a few exploded close enough to set the lighthouse on fire and leave it an abandoned husk of what it once was. It's now sitting in the water, completely forgotten, never restored, and likely never apologized to. Which of these abandoned places would you want to spend the night in? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thanks for watching. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe for all the latest and greatest videos from our channel.